Coffee is, without a doubt, one of the most popular beverages around the world. Of the roughly 8 billion people on this planet, 1 billion of us drink it every day, with many citing it as a requirement in order to properly function in everyday life. In some countries, people drink more coffee than they do water, and in many places you can find coffee shops on nearly every street corner. We drink it hot, iced, frozen, mixed with every kind of flavor you can imagine, and sometimes filled with more sugar than any human being should reasonably consume at one time. But coffee is also one of the most influential beverages in human history. It changed our culture, spread vast amounts of knowledge, and in some cases, even helped sow the seeds of revolution. So join me, dear viewers, as today, we explore the social history of coffee, and learn how our world became so fixated on this wonderful beverage. The story of coffee begins somewhere in Ethiopia. Though we don't know exactly when it was discovered or by whom, there are several legends that provide an explanation, the most popular of which is a story of a 9th century Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi. According to legend, Kaldi was out herding his goats when he noticed that some of them began acting strangely whenever they ate a certain plant. These goats were far more energized, running around, fighting, and even dancing on their hind legs. Trying the plant for himself, Kaldi then became the first person to discover the joys of caffeine, and thus the Ethiopians began cultivating coffee. But this didn't result in the instant creation of the drink that we know and love today. People didn't get the idea to actually roast the beans and brew a drink until much later. At first, coffee was just enjoyed by chewing on the leaves and berries in order to get some of that sweet, sweet caffeine. But eventually the Ethiopians would find many other ways of consuming it, like brewing it into a tea, making wine with the fermented berries, or roasting the husks to make a sweet drink called kishir. Trade would see coffee spread across the Red Sea, finding itself in what is now modern-day Yemen and Saudi Arabia, whose people would begin cultivating it themselves. Coffee would eventually become popularized throughout the Islamic world, as trade routes and Muslim pilgrims continued to introduce the drink to places like Egypt, Turkey, and Persia. Originally, coffee was used mainly for religious purposes, with Arab monks finding that caffeine was handy in letting them stay up late into the night for prayer. But eventually this stimulating drink would be appreciated by the greater population. Some wealthy people would make drinking it an entire ceremony, even having a dedicated room in their homes for enjoying a cup of coffee. But for those who did not have such a luxury, a coffee house was the location of choice. They soon began popping up all over major cities, providing not only a place to enjoy a cup of coffee, but also a place for men to relax and socialize with each other. And with the number of coffee lovers steadily on the rise, it was only a matter of time before it spread all across the world. Despite its eventual popularity, when coffee was first sampled by Europeans, many were appalled by its bitter taste. After trying it during his travels, British poet Sir George Sandys described the drink as being black as soot and tasting not much unlike it. Others trying coffee for the first time gave similar descriptions, comparing the drink to a syrup of soot and the essence of old shoes, with some even opting for the eloquent description of simply calling it shit. It is important to note, however, that the coffee consumed by these early taste testers would have been quite different from what we enjoy now, and would have more closely resembled Turkish coffee, a thicker and much stronger drink. But despite the initial hesitance to adopt this new beverage, coffee would eventually gain the favor of the Europeans, much like it did in the Islamic world. Upon its arrival in Europe, it was first viewed as a rare and exotic beverage, and was mostly used for medicinal purposes or enjoyed by a select few members of the upper classes. Considering the initial reaction to its bitter taste, it's likely that coffee first gained popularity in the Western world through social emulation. People also quickly realized the energizing benefits that the drink came with. Not only was caffeine an excellent stimulant, but it didn't carry any of the negative effects that drugs used for similar purposes did. Additionally, it was an excellent alternative to alcohol, acting as a social beverage that could be consumed frequently without fear of drunkenness. It was because of these benefits that coffee would become immensely popular with scholars. It's no surprise then that in 1650, Oxford University would be the home of the first coffee house to open in England, finally providing students with what would be their beverage of choice for centuries to come. 2 years later, a man named Pasqua Rosé, who was working as a servant to the British merchant Daniel Edwards, opened the first coffee stand in London against the wall of St. Michael's Churchyard. In order to help advertise his new product, Rosé would publish a handbill titled The Virtue of the Coffee Drink, where he would describe coffee, the plant it came from, and the various benefits that drinking it would give. This included things like the stimulating effects of caffeine, making one fit for business, as well as various medicinal benefits, like acting as a cure for gout and scurvy. In the end, Rosé's coffee stand would be widely successful, eventually triggering the expansion of the idea all across England. By the early 1700s, there were 551 coffee houses in the city of London alone, but the actual number might have been a lot bigger, with estimates ranging from between 2,000 to 8,000, since official surveys didn't count unlicensed establishments. Coffee was officially a staple of urban life, but the draw to these coffee houses wasn't just for the drink itself, but rather the unique atmosphere that these places provided. Early coffee houses were quite similar to other public establishments like taverns and alehouses. The interior would often be made of wood, with a large room housing one or more long tables. Though some of the higher-end locations might have had multiple rooms for higher-ranking customers, in most cases, coffee houses were a place where people of different classes would have to mix together in the limited seating arrangements, something that was very uncommon at the time. Coffee would be brewed in a large pot over the fire, where it would be tended to by the coffeehouse owner before being delivered to the customers by servants. While early coffee more closely resembled Turkish coffee, the coffee that was served later in the 17th century would have been a weaker, unfiltered brew that was often mixed with milk and sugar. But despite being similar to other public houses like taverns, coffee houses had a unique environment that encouraged the spread of information. The sober and energizing nature of caffeine led to these establishments becoming a hub for socialization, as well as a place to receive news, do business, engage in political debate, and listen to the latest gossip around the city. This focus on knowledge would eventually lead to coffee houses being nicknamed penny universities, a place where someone uneducated could engage in practical learning outside of formal institutions, and all for the single penny that it would cost to buy a cup of coffee. Coffee houses were also centers for spreading news, either by word of mouth or in various print forms like newspapers, manuscripts, and woodcuts. This news culture would greatly help spread new social and political ideas across Europe. But of course, as is usually the case with new ideas, there were many who saw the coffee house as a hotbed for rowdy behavior, social indecency, and possibly even a threat to society itself. Now, coffee was hated for a variety of reasons. Women in particular were some of the most vocal about their disdain for the drink, claiming that coffee houses took up far too much of their husbands' time and money, and that these establishments were a threat to masculinity. Coffee also supposedly made men impotent, which was apparently the last straw, because in 1674, the increasing frustration would result in the Women's Petition Against Coffee, a document which referred to the drink as a newfangled, abominable, heathenish liquor, before outlining the many issues that people had with it. This petition would spark outrage amongst the coffee-loving male population, causing them to retaliate with the men's answer to the women's petition against coffee, which claimed that coffee did not in fact make men impotent, but rather that they were now more virile than ever before. Only a year later, coffee would be targeted a second time by King Charles II, who on December 29th would issue a proclamation that would ban coffee houses in England as of January 10th, 1676. His reasoning? Well, he claimed that coffee houses had caused people to neglect their businesses and careers because they were spending too much time drinking coffee. But what he was likely more concerned about was the fact that these places were a major driving force in spreading new political ideologies, and the people were starting to say bad things about the monarchy. This banning of coffee houses would not come to pass, however, because 2 days before the proclamation was supposed to take effect, King Charles would roll back the order after the intense public outcry. Now, it might sound a little bit ridiculous to try to outlaw a beverage, especially one that's as harmless as coffee, but believe it or not, this wasn't even the first time that someone had tried this. In 1511, the governor of Mecca banned coffee after learning that coffee houses were spreading some nasty opinions about him. In 1633, another ban was attempted by Murad IV, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who also worried that coffee houses were a breeding ground for people forming their own political opinions. He declared drinking coffee a capital offense, one that was even threatened to result in execution. But neither the ban in Mecca, the Ottoman Empire, or in England would be successful in stopping the spread of coffee. It turns out, however, that these rulers were right to be scared, because the drink would later be involved in several revolutions around the world. The key role that coffee houses played in spreading new political ideas, especially those involving democracy, would make them a common meeting place for revolutionaries and notable faces of the Enlightenment. In France, Georges Danton would use a café as a meeting place during the French Revolution. And during the events leading up to the Boston Tea Party, supporters of American independence would also frequent coffee houses, as drinking coffee became a bold political statement against the British monarchy and their tax on tea. While coffee can't take all the credit for the social and political change it was involved in, the drink itself and the environment that it cultivated would have an undeniable impact everywhere it went. From the Ottoman Empire to the American Revolution, coffee has been in the background of many major events throughout history. Although today it might not be starting revolutions, it has become a staple of modern life, one that still encourages socialization and community amongst millions of people all around the world. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go have a cup of coffee. Hey everyone, thank you for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment down below. If you want to see more content like this, you can also subscribe to my channel, and keep up to date on all the fun history videos of the future. But for now, I bid you farewell.